A massive trade expo taking place in China. What will it mean for more economic integration in the Asia region? Hello, I'm Anand Naidu and this is The Heat. The 8th China-South Asia Expo opened in Kunming on Tuesday. The week-long event has attracted over 2,000 exhibitors. It is showcasing a wide range of products and new technologies from several countries and is expected to boost regional integration. We begin with this report from Kunming.
An annual big gathering of state leaders, businesses, and experts. The 8th edition of the China-South Asia Expo kicks off in Kunming, provincial capital of southwest China's Yunnan.
As one of China's key international trade exchange events this year, the Expo has attracted over 2,000 enterprises from more than 80 countries, regions, and international organizations.
Pakistan is the guest country of honor this year.
We have close to 180 business people. So that's probably the largest so far. China walks the talk. So China actually provides solutions, creates opportunities, creates conditions so that people can do meaningful exchanges. Beyond that, also they can promote friendship, they can promote understanding between people. So I think this is a very useful platform.
While South Asian and Southeast Asian countries have a strong presence, exhibitors from many other countries are also showcasing their unique products.
The main highlights of our exhibition focus on agricultural products, primarily coffee. We have a deep business cooperation with Yunnan in the coffee sector. In addition, we are showcasing our work in the circular economy, demonstrating how we process fruit peels using our technology to turn them into lifestyle products like bags. Furthermore, we have exhibits in the field of energy saving and emission reduction.
Previous years, there are not a lot of countries, but this year I've seen a lot. And it's a good opportunity for us to have the business and the culture exchange with the other countries.
In total, there are 15 pavilions featuring architectural technology, green energy, cultural and tourism, healthcare, among other areas, with quite a few leading enterprises of related industries participating.
During this expo, we will unveil 3 systems for the full-scale development of the traditional Chinese medicine industry: the resource system, the ecological system, and the technical system. Southeast Asia and South Asia are not only key international markets for Yunnan Baiyao, but also major supply bases for our strategic medicinal varieties. Therefore, this expo holds significant meaning and value for us as a whole.
China recently has reiterated its commitment to promoting high-level opening up. Participants at the expo say they are expecting greater opportunities in the Chinese market, and the expo will just play an active role in this regard. Yang Jinghao, CGTN, Kunming, Yunnan Province.
And now for much more on all of this, joining me is Andy Mock. He is a senior research fellow at the Center for China and Globalization. With us too from France is Liang. She is a chair professor in economics at Willamette University. Also with us is Sourabh Gupta. He is senior Asia Pacific policy specialist at the Institute for China-America Studies. And joining the discussion as well is John Quelch. He is vice chancellor at Duke Kunshan University. Welcome to all of you. Andy Mock, this is a huge exposition, 15 exhibition halls, over 2,000 exhibitors, as I said. What is the size of this expo? Tell us about the level of integration across the China-South Asia region.
Well, Anand, I think the size of this expo demonstrates, I think, the importance of this region to China and to the world. So South China alone is almost 1.9 billion people and approximately 4 trillion in GDP. So this is a part of the world that has significant economic weight. And if we look at the potential growth of some of these countries, especially India, there's enormous future growth potential, assuming some political issues can be resolved. But from China's perspective as well, because this is in Yunnan, which is one of the least developed areas of China in terms of per capita disposable income, this plays a very important strategic role for China in global development, but also in domestic development as well. And I think because of this, it's no surprise that we see this investment in bureaucratic infrastructure to complement the physical infrastructure that China has invested so much in to promote peace, prosperity, and stability in China and around the world.
Young Liang, if we look at the trade volume between China and the South Asian countries, it reached nearly $200 billion in 2023. That's twice the amount recorded earlier. What has driven this rapid growth, and what does this expo and the size of it tell us about the future of this trading relationship in the coming years?
Yeah, good to talk to you, Anand. So you're right, the $200 billion trade volume recorded last year was double the size about 10 years ago. So I think that has to do with a few reasons. One of them is, of course, as China grows, as it embraces an open trade world, it has been doing a lot of trade with nearby countries, including its Asian neighbors. And second, I think it's no coincidence when we look at 2013, it's when China started the BRI project. And so this project really helped to expand connectivities between China and neighborhood countries in Asia, especially in countries in the South Asia and Southeast Asia regions. And so I think these kinds of BRI investment projects that help to improve connectivity in terms of transport infrastructure and also in terms of digital network, all of these would help to push forward trade. And last but not the least, I think, again, China is aiming to promote regional peace, security, and also prosperity. So I think all these are the driving principles for China to go out and to partner with countries to have the kinds of win-win cooperation and as well as trade, because these kinds of trade help to facilitate division of labor, but also achieve economies of scale and help other countries to also participate in this kinds of global economy. And therefore, I think really help to achieve regional security and peace and also prosperity.
So, Rob, looking at the entire region, if we take China, then we take Southeast Asia, South Asia as well, that's a market of more than 2 billion people. I mean, what is the message that this expo sends in terms of the economic potential and greater economic integration?
I think it sends the message that this is actually a huge untapped market, but a market with immense potential. If we understand, the dynamic and the fantastic regional value chains that we have in the Asia Pacific, those are mostly, as I said, Asia Pacific value chains featuring Japan, Korea, China, and Southeast Asia. South Asia is not integrated into those value chains as such. Bangladesh, to some extent, is beginning to be. There is a great opportunity at this time for South and Southeast Asia to be integrated and China to provide a role and be a part and facilitator of that integration. This is apart from China and South Asia itself having dynamic economic and trade ties whose potential is frankly unlimited and has barely been tapped. As India rises, as Bangladesh rises, as Pakistan rises, I mean, Bangladesh and Pakistan have 200 million people once they become more prosperous, and Bangladesh is moving on a very good track in this regard. I mean, the scope for both production, consumption, trade, and exchange will be immense. And of course, India is, 1.4 billion people. It's already an economy larger than the United Kingdom, but it's just a $3,000 per capita economy at market prices. So it just says this Expo just talks about the potential that exists going forward and the means that parties are implementing to try to tap into that potential. And we are kind of at the beginning stages rather than anywhere to coming close to a maturity in terms of tapping that potential.
John Quelch, great to see you. Now, as we heard in our report at the beginning of the program, this year's Expo has attracted enterprises from 80 countries, regions, and international organizations. So what does the sheer size of the event tell you about the importance of the China-South Asia, Southeast Asia region insofar as the global economy is concerned?
Thanks, Anand. So just to put it in context, the 200 billion in trade between China and South Asia can be compared to approximately 650 billion in trade between China and the United States. But it is, as has already been stated, a very high growth region. And South Asia in 2023 grew at approximately 5.5% across the region. That's a very strong pace of growth compared to other regions of the world. And accordingly, it makes perfect sense for China as the major economy abutting the region to be the engine of growth. And as Yang Liang pointed out, the investments in infrastructure that have been made under the BRI initiative have greatly improved supply chain connectivity across this region. I read one report that indicated that the transit time, for example, between Pakistan and China had been reduced from 50 days by sea to 15 days by land as a result of the China-Pakistan corridor. So this kind of investment by China fuels integration, and integration fuels economic cross-border cooperation and trade and investment, and that fuels economic growth. And so an appropriate level of investment is being made by China in the development of the neighboring region, and I'm sure that it will be helpful to China to further diversify its trading partner base over time.
And John, you know, you talk about economic growth, and as Andy told us a moment ago, these countries already represent significant economic weight. Where do you see the greatest potential?
Well, if you're asking me to pick particular countries, we can do that in terms of the total population and the population growth rate, along with the GDP per capita and the GDP per capita growth rate. When you look at that, you find that certain countries like, for example, Pakistan, have very substantial populations already. Other countries have stronger per capita GDP growth rates. But combining those two into a chart, you know, a country, for example, such as Malaysia, would be a country that perhaps isn't so great in population, but has a lot of energy and momentum. Vietnam also would similarly fall into that category. But all of these countries are important, from the smallest, such as Laos and Myanmar. And all of them are represented in this expo, and that's an important signal as well, that it's open to everybody, and small and medium enterprises from all over this region, whatever the country of origin, however important or however economically significant, are welcome at this event.
Andy, at the recent CPC third plenum, we heard a lot of policy statements from China. China committed to further deepening reform, advancing modernization. It's some of the key goals on the part of China. I mean, how will those policies contribute to what we're seeing in the region right now in terms of growth?
Well, I think they provide the foundation as well as the guidance for China's interactions with the Global South. So the key phrase I think to emphasize here is not only deepening reform comprehensively, but Chinese modernization. And here we can contrast that with Western modernization, which, whether deliberately or not, has tended to place the interest of large corporations and the financial sector at the expense sometimes of the people. And we see how China's approach really has been to leave no one behind. And I think that this is something that makes it especially appealing to the global south, of which South Asia, of course, is an integral part. The other thing I would add here, too, is in terms of the more exciting long-term opportunities. It's not only the countries with enormous populations like India and very large populations like Pakistan and Bangladesh, but when we look at the composition of Chinese exports to this region, a significant portion is industrial equipment. And this matters because this allows these countries to develop their own manufacturing capabilities. And this, of course, is a very important driver for sustainable growth.
Yan Liang, looking a bit more deeply into the role that the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative, has played, you know, John Quelch gave us a very graphic example a moment ago when he talked about how transit times between Pakistan and China have been reduced so significantly. But if we look, you know, in the broader region, how important has the BRI been for economic growth?
Right. So I think it's a very interesting long-term and also a very broad range of projects, because with all these infrastructure, for example, John mentioned the corridor between China and Pakistan. It has invested about $25 billion over time, and it created, you know, 236,000 jobs for Pakistan. But importantly, with all these highways, with all these power generations and also power transmission networks, I think all of these are very important, not only for Pakistan's own growth, but also create this win-win cooperation between China and Pakistan. Now, in the recent years, the engagement has declined, particularly last year, due to largely, you know, their own political turmoil and some of the concern over, you know, security. But still, I think there's a lot of potential for China to continue with the kinds of investment projects and also with the building of the connectivities, not only in terms of physical infrastructure, but also, you know, digital infrastructure. I think that's also very important. And of course, Pakistan is just one example. We have seen China build, you know, international airport in Maldives, in, you know, Nepal. A lot of these are tourism-dependent countries that are really, I think, you know, improve their economy because of China's investments. Now, there's definitely also new pivot in terms of the China new phase of the BRI. We see a bit less investment in terms of infrastructure, especially outside of Asia. I think within Asia, at least last year, the per project you know, size is still about $400 million. So it's still relatively large project. But at the same time, we also see a lot more private enterprises investing in all these other countries, utilizing the infrastructure that has already been laid down. So I think going forward, we're going to see more small but beautiful projects that emphasizes on, you know, green energies, but also in terms of the entire supply chain of, you know, for example, EV sectors. We see lithium, we see cobalt, we see nickel processing and mining, and we're also seeing new energy development, as well as, again, digital economy. I think this is very important. Many of these countries are very much agriculture dependent, going, you know, from rice from Pakistan or tea from Sri Lanka. I think they can continue to develop their agriculture and utilizing all these modern infrastructure to be able to sell their products to China and the rest of the world. And so I think this is really helping, you know, this whole region to grow and also build stronger and better trade structure.
Sourabh, Pakistan is the guest of honor at this year's Expo. In fact, economic relations between China and Pakistan, notwithstanding those reservations that Yan Liang talked about a moment ago, I mean, the economic relations have really boomed in recent years. They are partners in the Belt and Road Initiative. China is playing a key role in Pakistan's transition to a green economy. There is also a lot of talk about digital development in Pakistan. Pakistan would like to see itself as some kind of digital hub in the South Asia region. I mean, how important is this relationship?
I think that it's a very important economic relationship, and particularly so for Pakistan. You know, you asked that question to Andy, and Andy gave a great response in terms of how China is integral to many of the supply chains, particularly in electronic goods and products. And I can build that answer out a little bit more and say that also China is so important for Pakistan in terms of building up its infrastructure. And we've seen that process happen already in building up Pakistan's electricity infrastructure, power. power to power your manufacturing sector. Thereafter, importing parts and components and intermediate goods which got embodied in final goods assembled in Pakistan. And here's where the third plenum decisions become important. If China can itself transition to a much more consumption-centered economy, China can be that importer of many of these manufactured goods from these emerging economies. This is how America had so much influence over the global economy, because America was this huge consumer. It helped provide infrastructure, it helped provide management experience, and it helped fire up the economies in many countries around the world in the 40s, 50s, 60s. And it kept its market open so that then many of these countries exported their way to prosperity, like the South Koreans and the miracle stories in East Asia. And here's China's opportunity to do that, the very same thing for the countries in the global South, particularly, and Pakistan is an important candidate. Of course, Pakistan needs to get its own house in order, and it needs to work out its own debt issues. So, I mean, this is not easily done, but considering the scale and the importance of Chinese investment, not just infrastructure, but also in goods, this has the potential for Pakistan to become an important hub for development of goods and products which can be exported both to China and to the rest of the world. So we'll have to see how Pakistan's trajectory evolves, but it's a huge opportunity. And from that perspective, I think CPEC, as well as the China-Pakistan relationship, is an important one.
John Quelch, China has also said repeatedly it is committed to foreign trade structural reform. I mean, that's a very technical term. I mean, could you explain that to us, especially in the context of the country saying that it is now going to be even more committed to reform, to opening up, what that means for the region?
So I think what that means broadly, Anand, is that the governance structures that control international trade and investment with China are going to become more transparent, more easily understandable, and therefore more accommodating to foreign investors and trading partners. And I don't think this is an approach that is being directed just for the sake of improving relations with Western countries. I think it's an initiative that is relevant to trading and investment relationships with all countries, including the global South. The particulars have to be ironed out, and in some cases, often the execution and implementation of central government mandates leaves something to be desired, because obviously in a very large country where there's a certain amount of provincial decentralization, making sure that the approaches that are sanctioned at national headquarters, if you like, in the capital, making sure those actually are implemented and operationally executed on the ground when local governments interact with commercial partners and put deals together. You know, that's a tougher thing to do, but it's part and parcel of the initiative here.
Andy, you know, as I said, China is already a global leader in green technology and the transition to a green economy. I mean, all we have to do is look at the EV industry, the electric vehicle industry. China is now the leader in terms of technology, in terms of production, in terms of sales as well. To what extent does that offer a great opportunity for China to integrate more with the economies of South Asia?
Well, I think it offers tremendous opportunities, Anand. So when we look at the transition to new energy vehicles, because many of these countries in the global South are still in the global South, in South Asia, are still developing, I think there is an opportunity to leapfrog the ICE infrastructure, so internal combustion engine transportation. And it's also important to point out here that when we look at the manufacturing process for EVs, it's simpler, there's a shorter supply chain, it can be significantly cheaper as a result of this, as we've seen with some BYD models. And this, of course, makes it much more accessible for many people in South Asia. So I think that it plays a very, very important role.
Young Liang, economies across the region are advancing. I mean, we often hear that this will be the Asian century. Can we expect then to see perhaps more trade agreements between China and other economies in the region?
Right. So, we already have a very regional comprehensive economic and trade agreement, which is the RCEP. So I think the next step is to really implement some of these already existing trade agreements and investment agreements to really propel, the trade relationships going forward. And I also want to just make the point about, this kind of regional division of labor is beneficial for all these countries that are involved. So again, going back to Andy's example of EVs, as I mentioned earlier, some of these critical minerals that are very essential to the EV supply chain, China has been investing, heavily in countries like Indonesia, Vietnam, and Bangladesh to secure some of these critical minerals, and also involving these local economies into the further processing of these, critical minerals to get more value added. And the other point about imports from China, from these countries in terms of manufacturing goods, I think it sounds all good, but at the same time, we also need to understand that some of these countries do need to overcome some of their infrastructure bottleneck, when it comes to connectivities, when it comes to, utility and power generation. So I think it's still very important for these countries to take advantage of their current, comparative advantage and try to get more value added out of their, agricultural products, and also try to develop their manufacturing sector. And I think China is playing a key role here in building infrastructure, as we mentioned, and also power generations. And also importantly, I think when China goes out to invest in these countries, especially when you look at China's outbound investment in Asia, has reached 20 billion last year, an increase of 37%. Yeah. I think all these local, connections when it comes to businesses, would also help these countries to upgrade their industrial capacity.
Okay, and we have to leave it there. We have run out of time. Thank you to all of you for being with us. That is it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C.